Hey, welcome to a brand new endeavor. And we are coming to you from the Hiawatha Youth Camp and Billy Walker Evangelist Association. And we're introducing a brand new podcast, and it's called Beyond Hiawatha, The Miracle Goes On. And I am here with my brother, Craig. Say hello, Craig.
Hello.
And also here with our good friend and part of our board and part of the staff and part of all things Hiawatha for, well, as long as I can remember, Mr. Bill Hobson.
It is an adventure to get this podcast underway. So, everybody who's listening to episode one, just know that this is episode one. And it's a really cool idea, by the way. I'm glad we're doing it. And over the course of several weeks, being able to kind of reconnect with folks from the many years of Hiawatha. I cannot wait. It's going to be very, very fun. And I don't know, Craig, if you want to dig into some of what motivated this whole thing and why we're doing this, because I do think it has great potential to really bring back together folks who maybe haven't seen or heard from each other in a really long time.
Long time. Sure. Yeah. Craig?
Well, both of you had mentioned parts of it in your responses. You said reconnect. Billy said 60, 61 years that Hiawatha has been around. And when I initially just thought of the idea, I thought there's a ton of stories out there that other staff members need to hear about it. There's stories out there that have maybe been forgotten. There's folks out there that I'm sure several other staff members are wondering, hey, what happened to them? And I just thought it'd be a great way to reconnect some of the old with some of the new as well. So we're not just hearing stories from 60 years ago, but we're also hearing stories of, staff members from 5 years ago who are serving as missionaries now and that sort of thing. And I just thought it was a great way to kind of connect everybody from all those generations and 6 decades of Hiawatha staff and campers, that sort of thing, and bring them together for hopefully what is not only entertaining, but also uplifting and encouraging, that sort of thing.
Yeah. What are the most, this is definitely off script here for a minute, but how many generations has the Hiawatha staff seen? I mean, we know we've got multiple families. I know you've got a podcast coming up with a couple from the Collins clan, and I actually have talked to George about doing something with him. And I've talked to some people who were on staff before I'm even a camper. So, I mean, we're going back a long ways. But what is the longest generation? I mean, we've got one, two, three from our family. We don't set the record by any stretch. So there's got to be some families that are looking at 4 generations now.
Probably. And you dig into like the family tree of my wife's family, of the Baker family. So Eugene Baker was one of the original
Yep.
lessees up at the lake in the UP where Hiawatha was located for the vast majority of our time. And from that family tree come, my goodness, she could do the math quicker than I could. But again, you're looking at now their grandparents and then their kids and then their kids. And now some of their kids are campers and very close to that age where they might end up serving on staff. So there's a lot of layers to all of this. And as we talk about this concept of beyond Hiawatha, the miracle lives on, that's what it means. It lives on in so many different ways, but of course, the most important being the eternal impact that has rippled through generations, that hasn't been limited by a change in zip codes, that it has continued to just weave its way through the passion that comes from the earlier, from my grandpa was on staff to my dad was on staff or I was a camper all these years. And we've been talking off air a bit about this project. And I think whenever we start talking off air, we just start telling stories and cracking up because that's what so many of us have. And I'm sure we'll hear that come out in the coming weeks, and we'll hear some of that today. But at its core, the parts of it that bring us to tears really are those spiritual decision points, those mountain high, mountaintop moments, and those things that we've tried to pass on to our kids and so on and so on. So there's so many layers to it. There's the fun layers, there's the lifetime friendship layers, But then there's the vertical connection between our experiences at camp and why it matters so much. And it still does.
Sure. Yeah. Craig, you also mentioned, I think, that when Hiawatha started, Dad was in the midst of doing a lot of other things, and it was Hiawatha that got added to the list. It didn't necessarily start all of those other things. He was already doing crusades, he was doing monthly rallies. And I think one of the things you mentioned to me was the fact that we want to kind of get back to BWA Hiawatha being more than just 5 or 6 weeks of camp.
Sure.
And the opportunity for a podcast gives us,
allows us to do that a little bit and see where the Lord might take it and see where the Lord might take us. And He certainly blessed us. He's blessed us with a good amount of finances. We're currently taping this sometime in mid-March, and I think we have maybe 40 or 50 spots available for the entire summer that are left. And I don't think we've been at that position for several years.
Yeah.
So He's blessed us in a lot of areas, and we're just kind of pushing to see where else He might want us to go. And I thought the podcast would be a great stepping stone to see where that might take us.
Yeah. Yeah. And he came up with quite a list of original people to start talking to. And so far, everybody I've talked to and people that you've talked to are like, yeah, let's do this. And
which is a really good time for me to jump in and say that if you're listening to this episode 1 and we haven't reached out to you yet, please know that we probably will. And if you don't hear from us and you think, I got stories to share, I want to tell you what the Lord's been doing in my life, just reach out to us and let us know. And we definitely will put you on the schedule. I was actually talking about your dad last night. I was asked to do the devotional for our elder board meeting at our church. And I was in Isaiah 41 and talking about the Lord's promises to Israel. They were in exile. They were terrified. They were frightened in every different direction. They didn't know what to do. And at the end, near the end of a soliloquy where the Lord is kind of setting things straight, He says, so that people may see and know, may consider and understand that the hand of the Lord has done this, that the Holy One of Israel has created it. And I cannot even come close to totaling up the number of times I would hear your dad say how much he despised being in the water, had no desire to go play or lay on the sand, did not like to rough it in the middle of a national forest with the mosquitoes. And I think his line was, I consider roughing it, turning the electric blanket down to 3.
yeah.
And he would always talk about why he did what he did. And it was so that people would know that only the Lord could accomplish all of these things through a preacher that didn't want to be there for the most part. And I think one of the cool launch points for our conversation here in episode 1 is to kind of have you guys share a little bit about the difficulty that it really represented every summer for Billy Walker Sr. to make his way from Southgate, Michigan across that bridge, because anybody who was at Hiawatha would never, ever have known that. It would have been a complete shock to the system. What do you mean? This guy has embraced this. This is his lifeblood. And yet, kind of a source of some stress and some anxiety at times, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You want to start with that?
My guess is you need to, because by the time I came around, he was more accustomed to it. So, I mean, we still made 3 or 4 stops because he was nervous, I think. So we'd stop like 4 times
on
for a 6-hour trip. But I think.
Well, and the truth is, though, that we found some of this stuff out after he passed away.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So, and one of them was just so odd. We're eating Sunday dinner at a restaurant here in town with my mom, and my wife works at an establishment here, helping with a banquet and catering. And anyways, there was a gentleman there who had visited this older woman in a nursing home, and he wanted Lori. He said, I cannot get to her. She's not doing well. Your husband's a pastor, right? Would you see if by chance he would be willing? And I was like, yes, I will do that. I will go by. I go by to see this lady, and I told her my name, and she said, Billy Walker, I haven't, and she's in her 90s. And I haven't seen you. I'm like, man, we've never seen each other. Well, one thing led to another. I wound up staying there for probably 45 minutes listening to this lady who had been part of Calvary in the 50s, had made dinners with my grandma Harris, but then talked about how her husband had gone north to this lake. And he went up there because your grandpa and your dad were having camps. And I said, Hiawatha Youth Camp. And she said, yes. And she said, my son actually worked on staff. And my husband went up there and he was sitting on a log after a Sunday night service. And she said, a guy came up to talk to him. And actually, it was the same gentleman, and his name, I can't think of it right now, but he was mentioned at Dad's 50th anniversary and the long story that you had to hold a mic for.
I remember his name, but I'll spare him the embarrassment on this podcast.
Just in case he by chance listens, right?
That was rough.
Oh, yeah. And I think, I mean, truthfully, he may have passed on, to be honest with you, by now. But anyways, he led
while he was telling the story.
He led that guy to Christ at Hiawatha Youth Camp. So I come back and tell my mom, and she's like, oh, yeah. And she said, actually, her son rode up to camp with us to be on staff for the first year. And she said, your dad used to put 2 or 3 young people in the back seat going to Hiawatha each summer, because if they were in the back seat, he would not turn around and go home. And that's why he took people with him, was to make sure that he made it all the way there.
But when you look at the starting point, he didn't even really want the position to begin with. It was offered to my grandpa first. And my grandpa said, I'm not going to do it, but I know the guy that can. And he kind of, I think, talked Dad into doing it. Yeah. I don't think it's something that he pursued.
No, I don't think so either. I think that Grandpa, he was speaking for Grandpa up there by then. Grandpa, my grandfather had Hiawatha Bible Camp. That's what they called it. Yeah. And in fact, we've looked back at some old church records, and the whole month of August, not July, the whole month of August was basically set aside in the church calendar as camp month. And so he would have Dad as his speaker, preacher up there. And so, I mean, Dad had been going up there since, I don't know, my great-grandfather bought that cabin in the late 40s. So they'd been going there for quite a while, started the camp before my grandfather ever came to Calvary. He had run camps at Hiawatha, at Pyatt, for Hiawatha Bible Camp.
You both realize, I would think, how mind-blowing it is to anybody listening to this podcast to be presented with evidence of the fact that for Billy Walker Sr., this was not an easy gig, that this was not something that he readily, enthusiastically embraced, except for his love for teenagers. And to hear you say that he loaded a few of them in the back of the car so that he wouldn't turn around and say, not happening. It's pretty amazing, because who would have ever, I would venture to say that anybody who's taking part in this conversation, who's listening in, would be hard pressed to find anything they ever experienced at Hiawatha where Billy Walker wasn't enthusiastically endorsing it. I mean, enthusiasm makes the difference, right? All of us on staff had to read that book every single year. And that's kind of...
And did you?
Well, some of us read it more carefully than others. Some of us may or may not have looked at the cover and then the back cover, from what I hear from some...
Is there a Cliff Notes version?
Other people. Yeah, these days you just throw it in Chat GPT and you get the summary in like one page. There will be lots of stories shared in the coming episodes of this Beyond Hiawatha podcast, but I would love to hear from the two of you, and I'll kick in some as well. What are kind of your flashbulb moments when you go through the mental Rolodex of memories of being at Hiawatha, whether it's with family or whether it's with staff or on the ball field or whatever it is? What are the like your top 5 moments that just kind of fly through your mind? They make you laugh, or they make you wistful and wish that you could recreate them. What do you go with?
I think you got to divide them up for me. This from far as childhood,
Hmm.
teenage years, staff years, that sort of thing, and then family, like immediate family after that, if that makes sense. So I mean, if you're talking just pure fun, enjoy, anytime 3-on-3 basketball with any of the Collins clan was always, as you get older, you realize, how unbelievably cool that was to be able to do that and participate in that on a daily basis, like
Daily.
day after day, summer after summer. It was just
Yeah.
something you took for granted. And looking back, you're like, wait a second, that doesn't happen everywhere, and not everybody gets to enjoy that sort of thing. So that'd be one. If you're talking about that sort of thing, if you're talking about like childhood memories, boy, there's probably hundreds. I
Yep.
can't tell you how many shindigs that we had with people, and just hearing some of the stories from speakers, from those that were singing up there, from other youth pastors, from executive staff members, all being at those shindigs until 1 or 2 in the morning and being able to be a part of those as a kid. That was pretty cool experience to be a part of. As far as being the director, just some things like my dad would say that you can't really write into a program that took place. Like one evening, one of my first years doing it, when Kaylee was leading praise and worship, and they concluded the service with praise and worship, and she told the kids that they could leave whenever they wanted to, that they were just going to continue to, sing, but again, they could leave whenever they wanted. And Kaylee ran through the entire playlist, and maybe 5 kids had left. And so finally, Kaylee was like, I'm sorry, we don't have any more songs to sing. So that's how the service concluded, because the kids just stayed there. To have that sort of thing and be able to be a part of those services and see it firsthand. Um, and I think maybe you take that for granted too when you see it year after year.
Right.
But when you look back on it, it's pretty cool to be a part of.
Yeah. Billy, what do you got?
Well, I'll go totally unspiritual here.
Okay.
Scott Stevenson taught me how to hit it in the trees.
Oh, really?
That was a banner day. Old yellow metal bat, and he showed me how to swing, and so those were epic moments.
If you're talking about like that, I mean, just the fact that you got to experience marathon softball
every week,
every Thursday, and then sometimes they'd play more than just on Thursday. And some of those, as you get older and you're able to watch it, not necessarily always playing. I mean, obviously it's fun to play. There were some great experiences. We could give so many Cliff Van Giesen stories.
We will.
Cliff Van Giesen.
there are rules.
There's rules that are
because
held
of
today
Cliff.
because of Cliff Van Giesen, and the people have no idea who Cliff Van Giesen is. But just being able to watch that competition take place with staff members who are really good at softball is pretty cool too.
And I do remember the time when, every week he would be playing shortstop and he figured out that he could chuck the ball so that it would go way past the rec hall. It would take the guy 45 seconds to get it. He's like, it's worth a run.
Yeah, for those of you not in the knowledge of what marathon softball is, we won't break it all down for you here, but let's just succinctly put it that each team got to bat for 3 uninterrupted moments to score as many runs as they could. So it would be in the best interest of the defense to throw the ball a long ways away.
As much time as possible.
Yeah, that would prevent anybody from hitting the ball next.
Yep.
Which is why we had the Van Giesen rule introduced, because Cliff's arm got strangely inaccurate at times.
It's crazy how he could not throw to the first baseman.
Who was the football team that? What was the football team that would come and rent the grounds from us?
Traverse City.
Traverse City, St. Francis.
Yeah, I remember one of the first years I was in charge, they came up there, they rented the grounds, and they wanted to play softball, the marathon softball. They'd heard about it, so they wanted their best 10 to play our best 10. And I asked the coach, I was like, are you sure you want to do this? Because that particular year, I'm not 100% sure who was on staff, but that particular year, the staff was loaded as far as softball players went, and especially the guys. And so he was like, yeah, it'll probably be good for him. And they played, and it was an unbelievable game. The staff guys absolutely crushed them. But the coach knew that going into it, but it was a fun experience to watch.
So, you guys have snapshots that take you onto the playing surface of the Sandlot softball field. My initial snapshot moments have me behind the fence as 5 and 6-year-old Billy Hobson from Lot 23 on East Shore,
Oh man.
every single morning would walk down to watch these games unfold as if I were at Tiger Stadium. And the great frustration of my existence was the lack of a scoreboard. I never knew what the stinking score was. And so I would frequently ask
What's the score?
you or your dad, what's the score, Billy? And I would just want to know that all the time. And you could never keep track of the score.
Oh
It was
man.
maddening. And so when the years passed, yes, I know it sounds pathetic and sad, but it was. I had nothing else to do. When the years passed and I was finally on the other side of the fence, it meant a little bit more because I was like, and I kept waiting for other kids from around the lake to come stand back behind the fence and ask the score, and nobody did. I was literally, I think, the only one in history who had this on his daily appointment schedule to go watch, to go watch softball.
Well, and remember back a few years ago, we used to have the staff game on Wednesday
Yes,
and then marathon on Thursday.
right.
And the staff game for at least a little while, that was almost as much fun as marathon. I mean, especially if you had a good team of campers, but then it got to be too one-sided and lopsided. But that was just those were a lot of funs, and especially when Dad would come out with with the lineup. Everybody waiting on bated breath if they're going to play softball or
Don't
not.
say it till he's on the show. Don't say
No, we're gonna wait till he's on the show. That's right. We'll wait until he's on the show. But I'll give you another one from my childhood. I'm probably, I don't know, 8, 9, maybe 10. I'm at a Sunday night shindig. Wendy Collins was a favorite speaker. But back in the day, he was also an international speaker. I mean, he went all over the world for gospel films and that kind of thing. He had just come back from Switzerland, and he brought back this little thing called a Swiss Army knife, which at that point in time was like, wow, this is incredible. He passed it around on Sunday night like it was a show and tell object. And they're passing it around, and it comes to me, and I open it, and I remember somebody saying, "Be careful now, it's kind of sharp." And I opened it up and I looked at it, and I just touched it to the inside of my thumb, and blood just started squirting out. And I'm like, I can't show this. So I put my hand down like in a napkin or something. I passed the knife on, and then I just got up and went into that small little bathroom that used to be the only bathroom in the cabin. And I am running it underwater, and I'm trying to get this blood to stop. And it is just, I mean, it is just all over the place. And I am petrified that I'm going to get in trouble for cutting myself. And I still have the scar from that stupid little Swiss Army knife. But anyways, that was one of my remembrances from early on childhood in a shindig.
Can't put a price tag on a story like that.
You can't be trusted with sharp objects. Speaking of near injury, I'll flash
Your wife stopped listening to that story about halfway through.
I'm sure she's already heard it.
Flashing back to near injurious moments. Let's go to the beach. There used to be a speaker during junior week by the name of Captain Hook.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Hook really did try to live the role. He dressed all the way up like a pirate, and he was a ventriloquist, not a great ventriloquist. Lips were basically fully moving while he was talking to Sharky, sitting on his knee, and Sharky, please, and all this. Well,
and he had an actual peg leg and
that
an
was
actual
legit.
hook.
Fully committed to the role.
He was Captain Hook. He was fully committed. Yes.
Probably had been playing with a Swiss Army knife, which was led to his career as a speaker. He created an event for the campers, which was to go down to the beach at night to find buried treasure. And some of us guys on staff were put into the role of invading pirates. We were out in canoes, out on the lake, and once all the campers got down onto the beach, we were to invade, to make a lot of noise, to come in and talk about how we're taking the treasure chest and all this stuff. What nobody really accounted for leading up to this moment was that these children, having been told that the treasure chests were full of candy, would take this invasion very, very seriously. To the point where they were finding rocks on the beach and beginning to hurl them at us with intent to harm. So here we were, what are we, 16 or 15 or 17 or whatever? We're just there to, make some noise and see the kids scatter around, and then we would all get out the treasure chest and share the. No. I don't know if there was one ringleader. I don't know how it all started, but we were ducking and dodging for our lives when, at the time, the athletic director, who I guess this fell under the umbrella of athletics, decided to step in and put an end to this madness. And I believe the phrase rotten kids was invoked at some
You
point.
rotten kids, get out of here. Well, they were diving at the treasure, and like some kid chipped his tooth and made a girl cry, and they were just going crazy for the candy.
Oh,
That was back in the day when you could entertain a lot easier.
and one junior camper, who will be a guest on this podcast down the road, decided that it was in his best interest to begin digging a hole in the sand in which to bury himself for safety.
Can we just point out here that this is an activity that we do not do anymore at Hiawatha Youth Camp? In case there's by chance some parent of a junior camper that's like, I think I'm going to send, then after hearing this, like, no, maybe Hiawatha's not the camp.
It's a very good idea.
We no longer do that. It was
A
only
lot of
Captain Hook
things, a
back
lot
in
of
the
things.
mid 80s.
Oh my goodness. All right. So as you all can tell, here we are, 30-ish minutes into the podcast, and we could go for hours. We won't do that. But I would like to kind of hit the top of your highlight lists for some of the serious stuff. And that would be speakers who delivered something that you still remember to this day by way of a message, whether it was way back when or even somewhat recently. What comes to your mind? Billy, you mentioned Wendy Collins, and who was there would ever forget his Man of God address, or his finish strong at his special surprise kind of retirement luncheon. But Billy, start us off. What's your highlight list look like from a speaker and spiritual input standpoint?
So, message that I'll never forget from Wendy Collins would be the point of no return. And again, if I'm a camper, I'm on the young end of things when I first heard that message, but it was just incredible. And he talked about the missionaries who had been killed, and he knew them personally, Jim Elliott, Betty Elliott. And then he talked about going to see his fighter pilot cousin, who showed him the cockpit and showed him the gauge on the fighter plane itself that said point of no return. And you go past that, you don't have enough gas to get back. And he ended that message with that illustration. It was, I've never forgotten it.
Mhm.
Miles Ginsko,
Yeah.
just probably my favorite speaker of all time at Hiawatha. Just loved hearing him. He was incredibly funny, but at the same time, when he gave a message, I remember one message he gave about he had a pretty bad relationship with his dad, but then at the end, his dad got sick. He's carrying his dad up the stairs to the bedroom, and his dad accepted Christ. And of course, Miles talks about the forgiveness and all that kind of thing, and that was a powerful message. Howard Hugo is another one of those guys from California, and the first time he came, of course, Hiawatha at that point in time was in a location that was not the easiest to find, and he had gotten somehow misled or lost. There was no GPS, and so they had people all the way to the caretaker's cabin to let people know, because Dad was like, I'm gonna, I'll take it to a certain point, but at some point I'm just gonna go into a message. Well, finally they got word he's coming, and he came running down in jeans and tennis shoes and talked about it. His message was God in a box.
Yep.
And it was a message about how the Philistines thought when they took the box from Israel, they got God in a box, and didn't realize you can't put God in a box. And so again, I've never forgotten that message. And then just, my dad had a myriad of messages that I remember his from Tuesday nights, Roll Away the Stone, you know, so many of those. And then he had one on Thursday night that was especially poignant to me way, way back in 1983, Dream with Me in 83. Um, and I remember that message and going forward each Thursday night.
Do you remember Win One in '91?
Win one in 90.
Might have the title wrong, but remember he at the end of the service had us all get together in like groups of 3 or 4, something like that, and share the person that we were going to win to Jesus Christ.
I
Do you remember this, Bill?
I don't. No.
Seriously,
No, don't remember that one.
want to share that story, Billy?
I'm I'm at a loss for
Really?
I'm obligated to now.
I don't think you're at a loss. I think you remember.
Oh, wait, I remember now.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
I think he
service.
was in the group with us.
We're supposed to share with the small group that we're in who we're going to go home and try to win so that we can, pray for each other and that sort of thing. So we all go around the group and we share friends, relatives, that sort of thing that we're all going to try and win, to the Lord. Okay. It's all going great. Then we get to Billy and we look at Billy and like, Billy, who's yours? And he looks at all of us and like with tears in his eyes, Isaiah Thomas. Really? Isaiah Thomas. Zeke, from the bad boys.
To whom you've never spoken.
No, never.
Probably never will.
So listen to this. This is where the story
But I did
really
communicate
interesting.
with him.
This is where it gets really interesting. I have a Pete Maravich book that I've purchased during the summer that I've read through, and I take it back to the home office. And as I'm there, sometime in like September, trying to find the Pete Maravich book that I purchased during the summer, I go to my brother's office and I'm like, Billy, do you by chance know where my Pistol Pete Maravich book would be located? And he's like,
To a dream.
oh, I sent it to Isaiah Thomas. Okay. Well, I'm sure Isaiah's read it and he's come to the Lord because of it. So way to go.
Oh man.
Putting
Hey.
faith to your decision. I mean, that's all you can ask for as a speaker.
I was doing what I could.
Yeah, he's not putting any money into it, but he'll allow me to.
Oh,
Greg
that's
had a
fantastic.
stronger investment than I did.
When you're talking about awesome services, Don Loney, as you guys know, was always extremely prompt. And when it was his time to be concluded with a service,
Done.
it did not matter if he was in the middle of an illustration, if he was in the middle of a Bible verse. If it hit the allotted time where he was supposed to be done, then he'd just be like, okay, well, that's it. We're done.
Middle
And
of
he'd
the
close the
sentence.
Bible and walk off to the stage. I remember his last service it was going to be his last evening ever speaking, not just at Hiawatha, but it was the last one that he was ever going to do he was retiring. This was it for him. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was almost like he did not want the service to end. And he kept going, and you could tell that this wasn't just, an ordinary service for him. He knew that this was the end, and he was reluctant to let go of it. And being part of that service was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, you talk about these guys from California. Ron Hafer was the one who started all that off for us. Without Ron Hafer, you don't have Charlie Scanlon, you don't have Miles, you don't have Howard.
Nope.
You don't have any of those guys who came for decades, I think, at least a couple.
Yeah.
Actually, if you span all 4 of them, it probably really does go for decades. But Ron was an unbelievable storyteller and communicator, and great testimony.
And he's the one who said, you need to have Miles.
Yeah.
And then it just went from there.
I have a Howard Hugo memory. I don't remember if it was the same summer because he did a few, but a message that was really themed around a cruise ship
Yeah.
and who was going to be piloting the cruise ship or captaining the cruise ship and the dangers of taking it over yourself. And it was just so powerful. And as you work your way through the years, I don't know why some messages sit with us individually and resound with us for decades. And it would be a different list for me than it would be for you or any of our listeners. But there were times when, what your dad would bring would just knock me to my knees. And then there were times where, for folks who remember this, Billy would always stay on the platform while the invited speaker was speaking. The staff would come down and sit in the first 6 rows, but he would stay up on the platform. And there was an evening when Colonel Jack McGuckin was speaking, and he's a great storyteller, but he had a lot of stories, and he had lost track of time.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I don't remember the first thing about the content of his message, but I remember being jarred almost to sitting up on the edge of my seat as I watched Billy Walker at like 9:45 p.m. when the service is supposed to be done and out by 9:30 at the latest. Slowly get up from his seat, take off his wristwatch while McGuckin is still preaching,
Yeah.
and lay it on the podium and turn around and go back to his seat and sit down. And if I remember right, it wasn't terribly well received by Colonel McGuckin, not publicly, but I think later on. But it was one of those moments like, oh, he's in charge here. We're gonna we're gonna make
That's
sure
the only time he did that too.
yeah,
Now,
we're
he
on a
did drop
schedule.
his Bible one time when Miles was speaking.
Oh, he
Because
did?
yeah, Miles turned around and said, "Billy, time to wake up. Stay with him."
And then I'll
Uh,
flash forward to there was a surprise thank you, appreciation, retirement lunch kind of a thing for Wendy Collins. And he was at the end, not only of his ministry, but really near the end of his life.
yep.
And this was up in the dining room area in the Miracle Building. And he stood in front of the fireplace. We were eating lunch. Billy was still eating while Wendy was speaking. I remember you getting in trouble from Lori for still eating while the man was crying as he was sharing his end of life story. You're making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She's like, really? Really, Billy? And I was fighting laughter because the content of his message was certainly not funny at this time. But he talked, and I have one of the things that to me is an indicator of a message that has landed is how many times in the years since you've told somebody else that message, or at least the crux of it. And in this case, for Wendy, when he talked about how when I'm approaching that finish line, I do not want to fall down and be crawling across it on my arms and my elbows and my knees. I want to break that tape with my chest. I want to finish strong for Christ. And that's my commitment to him. And this visual that he had painted of the runner at the end of the long marathon race, and it just jumped out of that room, and it was electric at that time. And my wife still has notebooks of all her message notes. I'm not that organized. I don't have all that stuff. But for some of those little snapshot moments, the impression that the Holy Spirit leaves on my heart is probably reaching even beyond what the notes would indicate. It's kind of you'd like to think it was a life-shaping moment. And we had so many of those, and we still do. So my last example will be at our current location for Hiawatha Youth Camp, which is near Roscommon, Michigan, on the property of Bambi Lake. And for our chunk of time every summer, it becomes Hiawatha Youth Camp, and it's our home. Well, the first summer that was the case, it was a hard summer. Let's just not get into it beyond that, but it was a very hard summer. And one of our speakers is a guy that we all love from Flint, Leo Robinson. And on, I believe, Friday night, I just happened to stop in. My travels were taking me nearby. And he delivered a message about the passing on of legacy from that location up north to this one, and how the responsibilities of the ministry and the people involved in it not only don't diminish, they're magnified. And he brought with him a cornerstone, a ceramic cornerstone, like 4x4 squares, and it was probably 2 feet by 2 feet. I have a picture of it on my phone still. And that night, he invited all of the staff and all of the campers to sign it as a covenant, before the Lord. And whether they all remember that or not, I sat in the back of that auditorium just weeping
Hmm.
and being reminded that God is not limited to a location. And we've seen that play out now for 3+ years at the new home. What a powerful reminder. And that's, the most recent message that I have that kind of really rings And that's why I kept the picture on my phone. It's just incredible to see. I don't even know where the actual cornerstone is right now. Maybe he's still got it and it's somewhere that could be permanently embedded if that situation were to arise. But that's good stuff, man.
Yeah, very much so. I think that we have probably gone over the allotted time that the director was thinking.
I didn't see him take his watch off and put it on the podium.
I don't think he's even wearing a watch.
Well, that's fine.
But and we don't really have a timer, so I don't even know how long this thing is gone. But
40 minutes in.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
And we could probably easily go another 40, but I do think we probably need to wrap up with the understanding that maybe a few episodes in, the three of us can come back. And if for no other reason, then it's a good time for us to remember and share some of the opportunities that we've had and the good times that we've had and the laughter and all that good kind of stuff.
Or we could have our wives on and they can fill in the correct dates for most of this stuff.
That probably needs to happen. That would be one heck of a podcast. No doubt about that. But anyways, Bill, thank you for helping us out here, especially at the beginning and getting this ball rolling. And Craig, any closing words?
I look forward to hearing some of these interviews that you guys are doing here in the next couple of weeks. Should be interesting.
One final quick note. We do want to hear from you who are listening. So there's a section on our social media pages on Facebook and all the other platforms. You're going to see the podcast posted there, and also on the website, there'll be a podcast page. We just like to hear from you. Just drop a note on social media. Please subscribe. By the way, most of you are probably listening to this episode. Maybe against our better judgment, we're also posting them to a YouTube channel. So you can actually watch not just this one, but all of the episodes as we go through, because we're connecting mainly through Zoom since people are spread out so much. So again, love to hear from you. Please subscribe. And as much as anything, please share the link to the podcast in audio and video form with anybody you know that has a connection in any way, shape, or form to Hiawatha. What a cool way to reach beyond Hiawatha. The miracle lives on, and to have all of you kind of help promote and propagate that message.
Yeah. At some point, we will have to actually veer away from the speaker realm and talk music, because my guess is we could have as many memories from Saturday celebrations, staff musicians, songs that we were a part of, saying all that kind of thing. And so we didn't even touch on that. So much to chat about. Thank you so much for being a part of this first one. And we look forward to being able to share with you in the near future. Be looking for the next episode. Blessings.